procrastination can be like, honestly, like a little bit of like a gold finder for you if you use it properly. And
Absolutely.
again, I use it incorrectly all the time, but remembering that like if something becomes a pattern of procrastination, it probably is because you know there's a better way to get this done, and it shouldn't just be you.
Well, it is 1 o'clock, so why don't we jump in and get started
Yeah.
here? Hopefully, there's a couple people here with us listening in,
Yep.
and some of you may catch this in the sort of post session replay if we're able to get that up online afterwards. But my name is Jane Helbrecht, and I'm the founder of Uplift Engagement, and we're here with Jordan LaBelle, the founder of Evergreen Growth Collective. And you may have seen us this week sort of introducing the idea of getting together and talking about the idea of doing less in order to do more. Jordan and I have really sort of connected on this topic over the last couple months, and even I think really like over the last year, we've kind of been talking about this. But recognizing that, especially as entrepreneurs or anybody in business, there's just so many options. There's so many things that we could be doing. And more isn't always more. We've heard that saying that, less is more. And I think that that's true in work as well. And we're really interested in how we can help people focus more, how we can help businesses focus more. And like each of us are interested in how we can do that in our own businesses and in our own lives as well. I really do think like work isn't supposed to be draining, right? It's supposed to be a place where we can feel good about getting stuff done. We can feel focused. We know how we can have an impact. And hopefully we can have some fun while we do it. So looking forward to diving into this topic with you, Jordan.
Yeah, same. I feel like this was destined to be, because I remember when I first started going out on this journey, you were one of my first coffees I had. And we both, even at that point, were talking about how the big reason we decided to pursue entrepreneurship was that the priorities we had in life were to be a little bit different than just like title and salary and being in a position at a company. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great thing to do for a lot of people. I think both of us just had the priorities that meant we needed more control over how we used our time and where it went for different reasons. But it's really the beauty of entrepreneurship is, yes, you do get on the roller coaster of the revenue roller coaster and the client roller coaster and all those fun roller coasters. But you do get that control over how you make money, what you can do about how much you're making, when you spend your time. And it's one of those things where you can get sucked up into just feeling like you have to do more and more and more. You see the influencers, the gurus, the whatever, and everyone's got their latest trend of the month. That's the thing that they want you to do that's going to solve all your problems. And you feel like if you're not doing them, you're just falling further and further behind. And I think what both of us believe is true is that couldn't be further from the truth. Is you don't need to do any of those things. You just need to pick the couple that really will move the needle, and you have to just nail them. And sometimes that means slowing down to get them right so you can go faster and do more of it. And so when you brought this up as a LinkedIn Live, I was a hell yes from the second you mentioned it. And it's a big piece of what we do. We do 4-day work weeks from the start. We work with our clients on sustainably growing. So not breakneck speeds, not grind hustle culture, but like, how can you have a business and enjoy having the business while you have it? Not when you sell it, not when you exit, not when you whatever the outcome is, but the actual whole journey is enjoyable. Yes, stressful. Yes, all this stuff, but fun, so fun. So I
Yes.
was really happy to get going into this, and it kind of leads into our next thought of, why is it so important to us? You can probably already tell just by how animated we are talking about it. We can get both pretty passionate about people taking care of themselves and taking care of the others in their businesses. I think this is one of the ways you can absolutely nail it is the businesses that feel most stressful are the ones where it's like just constant movement, the whirlwind, the endless to-dos, the nonstop hour-long meetings, all the stuff just jammed. And the ones we see really succeed for long periods of times are the ones who know how to slow down, take a breath, figure out what to do, and then go execute.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, you and I have been talking about this for a long time, but I really noticed at the end of last year, like Q4 2024, I felt like every client I was speaking to when we were doing leadership training and connecting about how they're getting things done, every team I was talking to, this was a theme that was coming up, was that like, we have too much on our plates, we're not focused, there's too many things we could be doing, and we just like can't keep up. We can't keep up, and we don't feel good about really feeling like we're making progress because we're spinning our wheels. And I sometimes feel like when I'm talking to clients a lot about those things or coaching clients, it's almost like I'm coaching myself because I'm telling them all of these things that I think they need to think about and do differently. And as I'm doing it, I'm like, oh gosh, these are the things that I also need to be doing, right? And it's weird how that tends to happen. But I'm seeing this really across the board. Like I'm seeing this idea of like job manageability almost going down, whether it's entrepreneurs at a small business or whether it's a big organization, that we're just adding more and more and more to the pile of things that people need to get done. And we're not strategically removing things when we're adding. And I think one of the things that can be really frustrating is I think we keep looking at like, okay, well, we need more time management skills. People just need to like manage their time better. But when we have way too much to do and everything is a priority, it doesn't matter how well you manage your time. You can't keep up. And, I talk a lot about well-being at work. And when we think about sort of what burnout is, like burnout is often when you're spinning your wheels and you feel like you're not having an impact and you're not getting anywhere. So if we can structure work in a way where people really feel like the work that they do matters and has an impact and they can see that impact, we're less likely to see that burnout along the way. I'm still working on getting to the 4-day work week for myself. It's a constant struggle. Here we are on Friday doing our LinkedIn Live series, but at
Fridays
least
are
it's
my day
something that's
off too.
fun.
So here we are.
It's something that's fun, that's enjoyable for us. But it is this like constant everyday process, I think, to keep prioritizing and keep figuring out what that biggest focus needs to be.
Yeah. I have just a concept to add in because it just touched on so much. The coaching other people and then listening to the recording back for yourself is a real thing. We do that all the time. And me and Tara talk about it. Like, why aren't we doing the things we just said to them to do? So if you also experience this out there in the internet land, like it's a real thing. Don't worry about it. You're really good at doing stuff for other people. You're not always the best doing it for yourself. Get some help to help you out. But the thing that I want to share is a lot of times with clients when they're busy, when they're 60 hours a week kind of busy, my first question to them is like, we as a people, everybody, spend so much time budgeting our money, planning for our future, doing retirement savings, planning for our house, our expenses. We have these giant spreadsheets and we have these financial institutions we go to and we spend all of this time and effort managing our money. But then how much of that effort do we put into managing our time? Like an even more finite resource than the money we can generate. Yet we just let it just happen. With time, we just do things. And by the time the end of the week comes, like, yeah, sure, the to-do list maybe shrunk a little bit. More likely it grew a little bit net. Mm-hmm. And you look at the results and you're like, okay, it feels like we worked a ton this week and nothing is different. I'm going to wake up on Monday with the same problems, with the same stress, with the same roller coaster feeling I've always been on. And the first step sometimes is just taking that account of where's the time going, treating it like money. Like what accounts are being drained the most? Where are we overspending? Are we eating out too often? Do we have too many meetings? Things like that can really help you dig into like where's the problem even to start with. So you have to go from 60 to 32. Maybe you go from 60 to 50 by cutting 10 hours that are not necessary.
Yeah. And really this conversation too around like managing our time, but managing our energy, right? Like how are we managing our energy so that we don't have to spend as much time, that we're more productive when we are working? And part of that is sort of rest and downtime being a part of how we get things done. And, I think there's some good research from Gartner that actually shows too that like time isn't the number one factor in performance. It's something that we equate with performance because it's easy to measure and it's easy to count. We can be like, wow, I worked so much. So even if I'm not getting results, like I can still say I worked so much. But Gartner has some really good research that shows, there are high performers that work a lot of extra hours. There's also low performers that work a lot of extra hours. There's high performers that work a lot fewer hours. And there's also low performers that work a lot fewer hours. So the amount of time that we're working doesn't necessarily equate to impact. And whether, again, that's small business entrepreneurs thinking about how they're spending their time, or whether that's in a big organization, like recognizing that that's not a number one factor really shifts the way we start to think about how we get things done, how we manage that energy, and how we get the most from our team.
Yeah. was actually on a late night walk through Buns Creek here in Winnipeg, if anyone's not from Winnipeg on this call, with a friend. And we like to go every month or so. Just we're both like big idea people, and we just almost need an outlet for someone to listen to the crazy for like a couple hours that isn't like our partners, either like personally or professionally, to just like get the garbage out. And every once in a while we get like some good gems of just like, we both end up around the same wavelength and we're hitting the same thing. And this walk, we talked a lot about action is so important. You can't get progress without action. So I understand why everyone's like just trying to look for the next thing on their to-do list, the next thing that a TikTok influencer is going to tell them to do, like the next thing to do to change their situation. But we talked a bit more about it of like, I think it's more important of like, what reps are you getting and are they the right reps? So if your problem is in like converting people from a discovery call to a sales call, going and posting 7 days a week on Instagram is not going to actually help you get any better at this problem over here. And it's going to take you a bunch of effort to do those 7 posts. And you're going to feel like you did a ton of work. And you're going to look at the results at the end of the week and say, wow, I got 100 new followers. Then you're going to take all the discovery calls next week and you're still going to close one of them. And you're going to look at you're going to be banging your head against the wall being like, why? I did all that work, all these people, I have all these followers and all this engagement, and I'm getting 1 client a week. What's happening? And instead it has to be scrap the Instagram. You need more reps and more like concerted, intentional practice effort into these sales calls. Bring that rate up first, then go pump the front of the funnel to get more people coming through the discovery call.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're so often focusing on the wrong things, right?
Yeah.
And when we think, I think there's a whole bunch of topics, we're planning to do this as a bit of a series over the coming weeks. Might be sort of every Friday, might have to miss a Friday here and there, but over the next number of weeks, we're going to continue to explore this topic, and we'll probably invite some guests on at some point to talk about the success that they've had with some of these ideas. But I think we'll get into things like talking about the Pareto principle, right? Talking about this idea of how sort of 20% of your effort in most businesses, projects, things drives 80% of the results. And how can we really double down on that 20% that is driving so much impact and do more of that? And then that 80% that is only driving, 80% of the work that's only driving 20% of the results. Well, that's clearly not working for us. That's not a good use of our time. So how are we eliminating, simplifying, automating that kind of stuff so that we can double down on that 20% that's really having a big impact along the way?
Yeah. And I actually use it in a different way as well, which is fun. I tend to like to focus on the people part of the business where I can to figure out, okay, I meet with an entrepreneur or founder and I ask, what are you incredibly gifted at? Like, what's the things that you were just like naturally born talent, very good at doing? You probably just love doing it because you're so good at it. And it brings you joy when it's on your to-do list the next day. Like, what are those things? And what I like to look at is like, how do we actually make 80% of your time go towards those things and 20% only go towards everything else? Now, obviously, day one, we're not going to say tomorrow you're going to cut 80% of your workload, essentially, and give it to someone else. But we can start looking at like, let's prioritize it. What does the list look like? Here's the stuff you're best at. Here's the stuff that like you're worst at, you hate doing, you put off for weeks and months, maybe years. How do we get like that off your plate? And then the next thing, and then the next thing, we kind of carve back to you're spending 80% of your time doing this 20% of activities that you're just like amazing at. Because that's where you get leverage and better results, right? Like you put people in their strengths and you let them cook, for lack of a better term. Like let them do their thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
absolutely. And you've actually,
is huge. Yeah.
That's an exercise you've done with me. We've talked, you've asked me those questions before, and we've gone through some of that process too, which is really, really valuable.
Yeah. The joy question always throws people off, but it's actually the biggest unlock, because I'm good at some things that I don't particularly enjoy doing, but I'm good at them. And if my whole day was filled with them, I probably wouldn't like my day. So those are great to keep doing now. Like I will still do those now while we're a small team, but eventually you better believe those are getting off my plate.
Absolutely.
So I can focus on the things I love. Another concept we talked about before this was, so 80-20, I think is a great lead into this of, and you're going to talk about another topic after this, which is going to kind of like riff on the same theme one more time. But I think people take the concept of like buffer time, slush time almost the wrong way, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
I think there's two elements, and maybe we need a new name for it or something, but there is true buffer time, slush time of like, you just need to give everything a little more time than you think it'll take, because something in your day will go longer than you expected.
Yeah.
So if you just butt everything up against each other, you're eventually going to be the doctor who runs late on an appointment, and it's going to snowball, and it's going to turn into your last appointment being an hour and a half behind. And no one likes that experience. Instead, what I've been trying to do a lot is actually planning scheduled silence, which maybe sounds extreme, and maybe you need to start with a baby step of like 5, 10, 15 minutes. But actually try to find a time in my day to purposely go like sit in a quiet room and do nothing, and just let what needs to happen the rest of the day come to me instead of trying to force it. Because I think we're all a lot smarter than we give ourselves credit for. It's just that we pack our life and our brains full of things every single second, and we don't let ourselves actually process the important stuff. So by adding in a little bit of that like scheduling silence and that intentional quiet time, you can let the things bubble up that you actually know are most important.
Yeah.
And it can be less of a thinking exercise and more of a feeling exercise, if I'm being honest, which is sometimes tricky to do. And I like totally get maybe baby steps. Some people like 5 minutes alone with themselves seems like the end of the world.
Worst nightmare.
Right. So I get it. So I believe me, it's a nightmare sometimes. But that kind of slowing down, while seems extreme and like, how could that possibly make you more effective? You would be shocked at what 15 minutes in your own head can do to reprioritize what the rest of your day should look like.
Yeah. Well, and this idea too, that like downtime and quiet time really does fuel creativity. And even that, there's some research that shows procrastinating to a certain extent fuels creativity. Extreme procrastination probably doesn't do that. But I see that with myself. If I'm powering through my to-do list, I'm doing a version of getting those things done that is about getting those things done. Whereas when I take a little bit and say like, okay, I'm kind of done this, or I'm close to done, but I'm going to sit on it before I send it or before I take the next step. I'm going to sit on it for an hour or a day or whatever. When I come back to it and look at it again, I actually do make some really valuable tweaks and have some things to add. And there's a bit more creativity there when you build in some of that time to be able to actually procrastinate and think a little bit more about whatever that thing is.
Absolutely. I think Dan Sullivan, I know we both are big Dan Sullivan fans, but I think he actually talks about how you can actually leverage procrastination as a really good delegation indicator. So if you procrastinate something very often, like it's not just a one-off thing that just you had a bad week and you procrastinated it. That happens to all of us. We're all going to be there again. There's no point in like really making many changes because of it. But if you find yourself with the same task and it just always comes on your to-do list and it always hangs around for way too long, if you want to use this as a superpower, you can take that as a sign that like you should not be the one doing it.
Yeah.
And you can find software, you can find a freelancer, you can find a contractor, you can find an employee, you can find a partner, a friend, a family. Like literally there's a million ways to solve these problems these days. It's really the identification that this is truly a problem and the prioritizing the right action about it. And procrastination can be like, honestly, like a little bit of like a gold finder for you if you use it properly. And
absolutely,
again, I use it incorrectly all the time, and I'm sure we all will, and no one's perfect. But remembering that, like, if something becomes a pattern of procrastination, it probably is because you know there's a better way to get this done, and it shouldn't just be you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a sign or it's a signal. And it's interesting when you sort of mention this idea of like, nobody's perfect, right? And
Hell no.
when we think about other ways of how we can like reinforce this concept that doing less actually gets better results, sort of long term, even on an individual basis, Harvard Business Review shared some really interesting research recently around how if somebody's sort of struggling with their performance, if they are overwhelmed, they're struggling to get to the finish line with something, that a really powerful question is to ask them for 85% instead of 100%. So whatever that thing is they're working on, to say, okay, tell me what 100% done looks like there, or 100%, quality or whatever. What would 85% look like? And what we find is that when people aim for 85%, they actually get a better outcome than when they aim for 100%. Right? That's probably particularly helpful for the perfectionists in our lives who are never done because they always think it can be better. But it's a really interesting concept again, that you can say, doing a bit less actually might lead to a better result. And there's that saying, I think, I don't know if it was originally from Facebook, but I feel like it's on the wall in Facebook or Meta, but it's, done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
And, that's true. Getting that 85% done, and realistic, as opposed to striving for perfection, can actually be a lot more effective.
I totally agree. And it's not even about the fact that it would be right. Sometimes you get it 80% done and it's wrong, but that it being out there in the wild, getting you that feedback is way more valuable than you hammering away at the other 20% of something that was probably still going to be wrong.
Yeah,
So then
absolutely.
you'd have 100% finish the wrong thing instead of 80% finish the wrong thing. The real value is like when you put it out into the world and you can get some real feedback on like, does this work or not? That's the value of the 80%, is to get it out there faster. Where it's still good enough that if it is good, you'll get the feedback that means, okay, this is worth spending the extra 20% to make it even better. Or this is good as it is. This is meeting our expectations. We don't need to go any further. This is perfect. Or this was a miss. Back to the drawing board. Let's try another thing at 80%.
Yeah, it takes some of the pressure off, right? Like it just takes pressure off people. It takes pressure off teams. And I think a lot of people like are feeling a lot of pressure at work right now. So if we can relieve a little bit, even if it's just a psychological shift, and they just are better able to get things done because they're making that mind shift, that's amazing.
Absolutely. I'll end us in this kind of spot with a story from whatever. People can just figure it out. I could say like from a company, but they'll just instantly know who I'm talking about. When I was at Bold Commerce before this, they're a fantastic company. I love a bunch of people there. So this is no knock. This is just when you're in the whirlwind, you're in the whirlwind.
Yeah.
But I distinctly remember this conversation because it's stuck with me since then. We had an engineering manager who came to us and said, like, we have to stop planning our development resources to 100% capacity. Because what happens is if we do 100% utilization across all of our resources, then what happens when something new comes in? Then we need a meeting to figure out what needs to come out for this thing to come in. But then we're still at 100% utilization. So another thing comes in. We have another meeting to figure out this goes in, what comes out. And then another thing, and another thing.
Yeah.
And soon enough, our 100% utilization of development resources to build the important stuff for our customers turns into almost 100% utilization in meetings deciding what to work on.
Right.
And that just slows everything down. Then nothing happens. We can't get customer fixes out. We can't launch the new features. We can't pay down tech debt. We just lose all ability to progress. And it's counterintuitive because you want to use all of your resources to move forward, right? Like, why would you leave resources on the table not doing anything? But in this mindset, it's better to schedule 60, 80%. Like, give yourself some back to slush time, back to silence, some room. So when the new really important thing comes in and it can't wait for the next sprint or the next week or whatever cycle planning you're doing, you just have room baked in. It takes no meetings, no decision making. It's like, is this worth doing now instead of later? Yes. Cool. We have room for that. And so when we made that switch in some teams, we just saw like the throughput went so much better. We got so much further faster. And like everyone was less stressed because you knew you had this little bit of wiggle room that if something took a bit longer, you didn't have to then go play the Tetris game of like reorganizing all the tasks afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's being realistic, right? About like what's on your plate, what's going to change, how things are going to evolve. And even on an individual basis, looking at a leader who is packed in meetings every day. And so they end up working in the evenings to catch up on their emails and other things, or the emergency things that take them off track. Even starting to understand like how many hours in a day on an average day do you have things that pop up that are unexpected that you need to deal with that day? And making sure that you don't maybe you're saying like, well, 2 hours of things a day pop up that I don't expect that need my attention. Okay, well then I can't schedule myself in more than 6 hours of meetings a day, and probably even less than that because I also need some time to actually get some work done. But really thinking about like, what does it look like to leave my calendar open to actually be able to address those things that pop up as opposed to overscheduling myself, then still having things pop up and having to do it all in my off hours.
Yeah. And if we take it back to the the budgeting money versus time metaphor. Like, if you were spending all of your accounts down to zero, then what happens when an account needs a little bit more? You go into overdraft. What happens when you go into overdraft? You get interest. Creates drag on the system. You spend money on nothing. You spend money on the fact that you didn't have enough. And so that happens with our time too. If you fill your entire day with meetings and the meeting budget gets overspent, you're now paying interest on your ability to do the heads down focus work. You're paying interest on the relationship building. You're paying interest on new customer discovery. You're paying interest on onboarding your new employee. Like, all of these things now slow down because you overdrafted on your meeting account. But we don't track any of that. Like, we don't even think about that. It just happens. We're just in meetings for 8 hours and that's your day. And you go home at night, open your laptop and try to hammer away on all this stuff at like 25% effectiveness, if we're being honest.
Yeah. And I think that that's such a good analogy. And it's such a good message too, of just saying, I don't think we have to live with work being this way.
No.
Right? Like, I think a lot of people are in that cycle and we get stuck thinking, well, this is just the way it is. And, ultimately there are things we can do. There are things we can put in place. And I'm not saying it's easy and it's maybe a bit of short-term pain for long-term gain to make some of that shift. But I do think work can feel manageable. I do think work should be manageable. And there are things that we can do to start to move in that direction and to really, doing less isn't really even about doing less. Like, it's just about focusing more, right? It's just about focusing our energy and attention in the right places so that it can have the most impact.
Yeah. I think just one quick last thought. I think some people hear doing less, and I've lived this experience before, so I know it's true. They hear doing less and they think less ambition, less success, less revenue, less team size, less measures that are important to them for whatever reason. But they think doing less means less of that. And I think what we'd like to change perspective on is doing less does not equal less ambition or less any of those things. Doing less means cutting through the noise to find the few things that will move the needle even further than your current level of ambition. Like, that's what this is about, not trying to reduce your ability to create results. And I think when people hear it, sometimes they jump to like, well, what about our budgets and our forecasts and our, like, we can't do less. How will we make all our money? It's not that.
Yeah. And it's actually, in some ways, it's actually even more ambitious. Like, we're so ambitious to be like, I think we can still have the impact, meet all the targets, do all the things, but I think we can do it while being less stressed and while things feel less chaotic and ultimately just more calm and more manageable. So it's actually massively 100%. Ambitious to say we can still do these things, but we can do them in a way that like align with our values and how we want to get work done.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this has been a really good sort of first chat to set the stage on what we're going to be talking about over the coming weeks. We're still working through a few thoughts on people that we want to invite on to discuss this topic with us. So if you're somebody who's tuning into this and you've had some really positive experiences making this type of shift in your team or in your business, and you want to connect with us and see if there's an option for you maybe to join us for a discussion, please feel free to do that. We're talking with a few other folks and seeing when we can schedule them in right now. So we're going to be getting Joe O'Connor, Grace O'Connor on or Grace Talon, I should say, to join us. They're from the Work Time Reduction organization. They're based out of Toronto. And they do a lot of incredible work helping organizations move to the 32-hour work week, 4-day work week, which sort of aligns with this topic as well. So we're hoping to have them on in the coming weeks. Thank you so much if you were able to join us today and listen in. And if you're listening to the replay, please feel free to add some comments, add some thoughts, and we'll make sure to keep track of those and connect with folks with any questions that they have along the way as a follow-up to today's discussion. So happy Friday, Jordan.
Yeah. Happy day off.
Happy day off. I'm going to get my nails done after this. Nice. So that's the rest of my afternoon. Hope everybody has a great weekend and we look forward to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone would like to connect one-on-one to talk more about this topic, things they're seeing in their business, I think both Jane and I can drop some of our info in the comments on the recording, and we're always, DMs are open. So jump in. I could talk about this stuff all day, every day, and I'm sure Jane could too. So we will not turn down an interesting conversation.
For sure. Excellent.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Jane. Enjoy your nails session, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.